What's up, Flannelverse? We are back. We are flanneled up for the stream. Did not forget tonight. Not going to make the same mistake 2 nights in a row. So I'm flanneled up for this Brazil game, breaking down Packers and Eagles in Brazil. I don't even know who's technically the home team. I don't think it matters. This game is in Brazil. So didn't even bother looking which team is the home team in this game. Going to be going for about an hour to give myself a little bit of time to make lineups after the stream is over. As you can see over there, going to be going position by position, starting with quarterbacks, then running backs, receivers, tight ends, defense, and kickers. And then I'll take any questions you have. Maybe try to make a couple lineups while we're in it. Oh, that's good. I got to open up my DraftKings. I knew I was forgetting something. It has been a day for me. I have been writing all day today, all day yesterday for the main slate. So, a little bit tired right now, a little bit loopy. So bear with me, but we're going to break down this slate. Super excited. All right, here's where we can play around with lineups. But again, we're going to start with quarterback, and then we'll go through position by position. Let me get back on the right screen here. What's up, guys? Really appreciate all of you hanging out. Added several subscribers last night. That was really fun. I'm excited to be doing DFS content. I loved doing best ball content throughout the summer, but there's nothing quite like DFS content. Just fun to have the slate right in front of you, much simpler, easier to break down. So I'm excited to be doing DFS content again and Showdown specifically. Again, starting with quarterbacks here. Quarterbacks are pretty straightforward. Jalen Hurts, probably the best play on the slate. I'm going to have Jalen Hurts in a majority of my lineups. He won't make every single one of my lineups, but I bet Jalen Hurts ends up in 80% of my lineups overall. And obviously, fantastic play. He is a running quarterback, tons of rushing upside, solid pass catching options. Generally, Jalen Hurts, you don't need to play him with any pass catchers. I would, if I have him in the captain spot, I prefer to play him with pass catchers. You just don't see it very often where the quarterback ends up as the optimal captain without any of their pass catchers in the flex. So if I'm playing Jalen Hurts in the captain, probably going to be stacking him up. I actually prefer to have him stacked even when he is in the flex, but you certainly don't need to. Jalen Hurts, very, very good on the ground as well. Yeah, Steven says 80% might even be under the field. Yeah, I mean, everybody's going to play Jalen Hurts, in part because this is a slate, much like last night, where we just have several cheap options. Like some of the best plays on this slate are just way too cheap for their roles. So again, kind of play whoever you want. Hard not to think that Jalen Hurts gets into the winning lineup just for how well he projects. So I like Jalen Hurts quite a bit. Generally going to be stacking him up, but not necessarily always. Amandi, do you still use stochastic tools? Sometimes I use a mix of tools. I have, Establish the Run. I have roto grinders. I have 4for4. I have fantasy points. That's what you're looking at on the screen right now. This is all fantasy points data that I have on the screen. I should note this just happened. I haven't even updated it in the description of this video, but up to the discount you can get if you use my new promo code is flannelman25, all one word, flannelman25. You get 25% off any package at Fantasy Points. I should shout that out because I am using their tools on this stream using the data suite. And then what I'm showing right here is just the DFS projections, easy way to show, look through position by position on the slate. So love Jalen Hurts, and no pun intended, also Jordan Love is going to be a great play on this slate. He is the second best projected play on the slate. He's a very good quarterback. We saw last year Jordan Love kind of broke out. Sadly, as a Vikings fan, didn't love to see it, but I do think, again, not trying to do puns here, but Jordan Love, very good last year. I think he's probably still going to be very good this year. He is the second best projected play on the slate. Does not have the same rushing upside that Jalen Hurts has. Rushed for, I want to say, 15 yards per game. I just looked up something right around 15 yards per game last year. I'm stacking him up. Anytime I have Jordan Love in my lineup, he will be stacked with at least one pass catcher. If I have Jordan Love in the captain spot, at least two pass catchers. Generally, two is going to be the target if I have Jordan Love in the captain spot. But again, these pass catchers are cheap enough. You can play more than two in a lineup if you want to. But yeah, if I play Jordan Love in the captain spot, I will be pairing him up with at least two. I'm going to have less of Jordan Love than Jalen Hurts. Probably more like 50% of my lineups. Not going to be jamming him in the same way that I do with Jalen Hurts. So yeah, I think that does it for quarterbacks. Yeah, we covered the correlations, covered about my exposure. I think both are going to be extremely highly owned. Let me look at some ownership projections. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of interesting, actually. I'm seeing Jalen Hurts will be more than double Jordan Love in the captain spot. So I have gotten to the point where I'm trying to play quarterbacks in the captain spot a little bit less this year. I've always played allowed for up to 20%. I'm cutting back on that a little bit this year, but with Jordan Love projected for in the industry like 10 to 15% ownership, I actually think that's a pretty fair number because he's not that expensive, just 9,800. And then you can pair him with several of his pass catchers. So I might end up overweight to Jordan Love in the captain spot. But Jalen Hurts also, I mean, Jalen Hurts going to be higher owned than Jordan Love. He's also only 10,600, just a little bit too cheap for Jalen Hurts. It's too easy to play the quarterbacks on this slate. They project the best. They're probably going to end up in the winning lineup. So like I said, probably going to have 80% Jalen Hurts. Maybe I'll end up with 50, 60% Jordan Love. And I think they're both viable in the captain spot as well as in the flex. All right. Um, Darnell, no, I posted in the Fantasy Points Discord just some notes on the slate, but I'll be going over it here as well. It was just very, very quick. I did not have time to do an extra written piece today because I'm so busy with all my main slate stuff. So unfortunately, did not have time to do that today. All right, going to move on to running backs. This is where it starts to get a little bit more interesting. We did just get Marshawn Lloyd ruled out for the Packers, so that changes things a little bit as far as the running backs go. And you can see here, we do still have a projection in there for Marshawn Lloyd, but I think you can just basically, push that down, spread it out to Emmanuel Wilson a little bit and up to Josh Jacobs. Obviously, the two primary running backs here are going to be Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. They are both going to have, I think, significant usage here. I think at least to start the year, both are going to be bell cows, particularly with Marshawn Lloyd out. Emmanuel Wilson has been dealing with I believe, a hip injury recently. I don't know that really affects things. He's active for this game. He's the RB2, but I do think they're going to be leaning on Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. They're shiny new toys. Both project very well. Saquon Barkley projects for 16.8 fantasy points. Josh Jacobs 15.7. The price tags are Saquon Barkley, the salary is pretty close to Jordan Love. Maybe that pushes down the salary a little bit. I think people just really like Saquon Barkley, though. So I suspect he does end up fairly highly owned. I think both of these running backs do end up fairly highly owned. Looking at industry projections, yeah, I mean, we're looking at around 50, a little bit under 50% ownership on each of the running backs. I am going to be underweight to the running backs. Just a little bit too high for my liking. I think I'm more inclined to play it through the receivers who are cheaper, who have the same kind of ceiling. So I think I end up a little bit underweight to both Josh Jacobs and Saquon Barkley, just because they are so chalky. I think I'd rather play the slate a little bit differently. Both obviously fine plays, two of the top projected plays on the slate. But since I'm trying to avoid some ownership, some duplication, I think I'm going to be a little bit underweight to both Saquon Barkley and Josh Jacobs. What's up, Sotex? Good to see you here. Here, I'll answer some questions. Hurts and Eagles D. Yeah, you can definitely play Hurts and Eagles defense. I'll get into the defense a little bit. That is kind of an angle that I'm playing, is a lot of Eagles defense. Probably going to be one of my bigger stands on this slate, but I'll get there in a little bit. Can you play a wide receiver or tight end in the captain or MVP without their quarterback? Absolutely. I think that is underutilized. People usually, when they play a wide receiver or tight end in the captain, they immediately want to put the quarterback into the flex. But if you put in, let's say you put Christian Watson in the captain spot, it's still not that unlikely. Even if Christian Watson is the optimal captain, it's still not that unlikely that Jalen Hurts outscores Jordan Love, for example. So definitely viable to play a wide receiver or tight end in the captain spot without their quarterback. And yeah, we'll get to the next, Emmanuel Wilson. So with Marshawn Lloyd out, Emmanuel Wilson should be the RB2 for the Packers. I like him quite a bit. He's going to be under-owned. I guess I can look at updated ownership across the industry, but I suspect not a lot of people are going to be going out of their way to play Emmanuel Wilson. He's still, to be clear, he's mostly a contingent play. He's not like it's not likely that Emmanuel Wilson does a lot on the slate. So I don't want to make it sound like Emmanuel Wilson is like some slam dunk play. He's mostly a contingent upside play. If anything happens to Josh Jacobs, the game gets out of hand. They need to use him a little bit more. He could vulture, in like in a regular game script, could get there with a vulture touchdown or something. But I don't think that is the most likely scenario. He's still a relatively thin bet, but I think it is a relatively thin bet who's still probably a better bet than his ownership would indicate. So I still like him for a large field GPP. He's not somebody that I'm going on my way to play in like a small field GPP. He's gonna come in at like single digit ownership. He probably should be at single digit ownership, but I'll probably have something like 10%. Emmanuel Wilson would be my target. He's 2,400. The price is right, so that if he does get in the end zone, probably pays it off, but not necessarily. Again, we have several cheap enough options on this slate that with him being 2,400, he still might not be optimal if he just scores a touchdown and he has 7 fantasy points on the day. He might need to do a little bit more than that. So not the strongest bet. I like him just fine for large field GPPs, but I'm not playing Emmanuel Wilson anywhere else. Likeliest smash spot. Let me think about that a little bit. I'm not sure that I really see a likely-esque smash spot because likely ended up single digit ownership last night. That was and it was sort of predictable. I mean, it wasn't entirely predictable. We talked about it last night. Like, it seemed pretty likely that he was going to have a bigger role than he had last year because of the moves that the Ravens made over the offseason. Didn't really add anybody. People were talking about it like they were going to run the 2 tight end sets. So it was sort of predictable that he was going to be out there quite a bit. He did not end up getting a ton of ownership. So I don't think we have anybody who is on the likely level play tonight. And to be clear, like I was way more in on Rashad Bateman than Isaiah Likely, so I'm not trying to like rewrite history and make it sound like I slammed him into my lineups. I was overweight to the field on Isaiah Likely. I liked him because I thought the narrative was strong enough that they might play him with Andrews. But I wish it had been Bateman. I'll be honest about that. That's a good call. Could be Kraft. That is actually, if you're looking for the who is tonight's Isaiah Likely, it could be Tucker Kraft because he's playing tonight. It would not be that shocking. Like, it's more likely that Kraft overtakes the tight end 1 role than Isaiah Likely this season. Maybe that's a hot take now after last night. I think a lot of people are like, see, he's the starter and Mark Andrews is backup. I don't think that's the case. I still think Mark Andrews is the starter. Isaiah Likely is the backup. But like I said, they're going to be playing together quite a bit. I think that Kraft is probably more likely to actually take the tight end 1 role for the Packers than Likely is to take it for the Ravens. So Kraft might be that guy. I'll get there with Kraft. What's up, Nez? Good to see you, Nez. Watson. See, you say Watson is tonight's Likely, but he's not low enough owned. I think Likely was sort of a unique situation. I'm not sure we have that on the slate, but I think Kraft is a good call out. I'll continue going through. Then the only other running back that I think I'm playing is Kenneth Gainwell, 3,400. We do have Will Shipley on the slate. He is active tonight, but I think Kenneth Gainwell, for now at least, is still playing ahead of Will Shipley. Will Shipley, one of my favorite best ball targets late in drafts, but I think he's more of a contingent bet for later on in the year. I think for now at least, Kenneth Gainwell still has that running back 2 role. If something did happen to Saquon Barkley, I think Kenneth Gainwell is the running back who would come in. So I do like Kenneth Gainwell, 3,400. I think that he should have a role. We saw him last year towards the end of the year. He sort of took on more and more of a role for the Packers. Obviously, they signed Saquon Barkley. I'm not expecting a split here. I think Saquon Barkley is the guy for the Eagles, but I think Kenneth Gainwell should have some role here, could vulture a touchdown, and then obviously has contingent upside also, and he's going to go very low owned. I think I just checked and he had single digit projected ownership. So I think Kenneth Gainwell as a contrarian GPP play, very solid. Projected for right around 10-11% ownership. Kind of into it. Not playing him at captain, but I would play Kenneth Gainwell on the flex. And got the question last night. I'll reiterate. Yes, I am willing to play 2 running backs together. We almost saw it work out last night. Didn't quite get there with Justice Hill and Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry got the 1 touchdown and then did like nothing else. But certainly you can play these running backs together. they are not, too expensive for that to work out. The only impactful inactive is Marshawn Lloyd. Makes Emmanuel Wilson a little bit better. He is like the clear RB2. If Marshawn Lloyd were there, I would have preferred Lloyd over Emmanuel Wilson. But yeah, I think with Lloyd out, that does boost Emmanuel Wilson a little bit. All right, so I think that covers it for running backs. Yeah, I'm going to be a little bit underweight to the starters, probably going to be a little bit overweight to the backups. That is kind of how I roll. The backup running backs just have, the best contingent upside. If anything happens in the first half to the starters, they're just going to get run and get a lot of it, and they're not very expensive. So generally, I like playing backup running backs a bit on showdown slates. All right, I'll move on to wide receivers. Second. All right, so wide receivers. AJ Brown is as you can see here, the top projected wide receiver on the slate by quite a bit. More expensive than Jalen Hurts, more expensive than Jordan Love. He is the most expensive player on the slate. That's kind of shocking that he's more expensive than Jalen Hurts. But as you can see here, projects very well. Should be, partially covered by Jair Alexander. So that is a tough matchup. But I don't think it's not going to be like shadow coverage on AJ Brown the whole game. Should still have some opportunities, and obviously he can beat Jair Alexander no matter how talented Jair Alexander is. So yeah, I like AJ Brown. Let me double check ownership a couple places. I assume he's going to be super highly owned, but I'll double check that. Yeah, again, looking at right around 50% ownership, similar to the running backs. Who would I prefer? Who would I prefer, AJ Brown versus the running backs? Looks like he's going to be a little bit lower owned in the captain spot, most likely. I think I prefer AJ Brown to the running backs. Obviously, you can correlate him with Hurts. Yeah, I think I prefer AJ Brown to the running backs, but it is pretty close. He's obviously very expensive, limits what you can do with the rest of your lineup. Might be covered by Jair Alexander for a lot of the game, so it is pretty close. I don't feel that strongly about AJ Brown versus the running backs, but he's a stud. He's a great play. I list out the studs who I want at least 3 of in every single lineup. He is well within that group, to be clear. So yeah, AJ Brown, very solid play. I don't really know that there's much else I need to say. The only note is, yeah, he probably will be. If Jair Alexander is shadowing anybody, it will be AJ Brown. I'm guessing he'll shadow him for part of the game. That maybe impacts his floor at the very least. Probably impacts his ceiling a little bit also. So that is the one note about AJ Brown. And then, of course, that makes you like Devontae Smith a little bit better. If we're expecting Jair Alexander to run with AJ Brown, maybe it forces the ball to Devontae Smith a little bit more. He's $2,000 less expensive. Clearly has that big play, like slate breaking upside. So I do like Devontae Smith quite a bit. And he'll come in at a bit lower ownership than AJ Brown too. He's projected for lower ownership. He'll definitely get, or I would expect him to get lower captain ownership as well. So I do like Devontae Smith. Yeah, he's projected for lower captain ownership. I like him quite a bit as well. Probably if I were, making one lineup and I wanted to have just one Eagles receiver in it, it would be Devontae Smith over AJ Brown for me. Dotson playing the slot. Yeah, I mean, I think we could see here. I think we could see some Devonta Smith in the slot. Also, I think there were some rumors about that. Now that's a good question, because most of those were before they signed Dotson. So that is a very good question. I think, yeah, Dotson will play some slot. I think Devonta Smith will also play a bit in the slot, but hard to know for sure. It's a very good question. Do you think Jaden Reed will be heavily targeted tonight if Green Bay pass rush is efficient, causing Hurts to scramble? Jaden Reed, if we're causing Hurts to scramble. I'm not sure I understand the correlation there. I do think Jaden Reed will be heavily correlated, but I don't think I understand what you are saying there. Sorry. So maybe. Oh, okay. You messed it up. So you're, yeah. I do think that Jaden Reed could be heavily targeted is the answer. Um, but it is so we'll get to wide receivers. Let me to get to the Packers wide receivers. Let me finish the Eagles first here. Um, Johnny Wilson, huge rookie receiver, probably not going to do a ton. He's 1,600. And Jahan Dotson. So I think Jahan Dotson is one of the more interesting plays on the slate because I think he's going to come in highly owned. He's not projected for super high ownership in the places that I've looked. So if he does come in around, so yeah, let's see, looking for close to just double digit ownership in this spot. Let me look at another one. If he does come in sub like 15% ownership, which everywhere is projecting Jahan Dotson for sub 15% ownership. Yeah, I like him, and I'm not super into Jahan Dotson. He's somebody that I like didn't draft in best ball at all. But if he's going to come in at sub 15% ownership at 3,200, we know he has big play upside. Yeah, I think that I probably would like Jahan Dotson more than what the field is playing. Yes, I think Jahan Dotson does get some run tonight. I don't know how much. He hasn't been on the team that long, but yes, I do think that Jahan Dotson gets some run tonight. I think that he's probably the wide receiver 3 for the Eagles. I'm not a huge believer in the talent of Jahan Dotson, but I think we saw him with a much worse offense last year, so I definitely understand the bull case for Jahan Dotson. Let's see here. Let's take a look at the Eagles numbers in terms of and he won't show up here, but you're looking at yards per route run. AJ Brown 2.77, Devonta Smith 1.96, Dallas Goedert 1.47. Where'd Dotson come in? 0.85 yards per route run last year. Just not great at all. Now that is going to be affected by the offense that he was in. Obviously, you can't get yards if the entire offense is struggling. Target share though, just 12.6%. That's not great. Didn't really earn targets last year on the Commanders when he had significant opportunity to earn targets. So I'm not a huge believer in Jahan Dotson, and yet if he's going to come in at sub 15% ownership, like everybody is projecting he will, like I said, his rookie year, we saw him. He had some breakaway plays. I think that's within his range of outcomes. His projection is also all over the place. I'm going to be above weight to the field on it. I don't know how much run he's going to get. I don't think anybody really knows exactly how much Jahan Dotson is going to get. He's not like somebody I'm trying to play in half of my lineups, but I think might make it into 20% of my lineups, just a little bit above weight to the field. And then if it turns out that he comes in higher projected than what places are expecting, then I'm going to feel dumb because I don't really want to play Jahan Dotson. It's just he's one of those plays. If he's going to be super low owned, could just have one splash play to pay off his salary. So yeah, I'll be playing some Jahan Dotson tonight. And I think Johnny Wilson probably also doesn't get a ton of run. I think it's mostly he could score a touchdown. Wouldn't be that surprising if they bring him in for a package in the red zone, just a big body to target in the end zone. So 1,600, I think it's a cheap enough price tag that a touchdown would probably be enough for Johnny Wilson. So I do think that he is in play, and I don't think I'm playing any Britton Covey. I think the Packers, though, this is where things get really interesting. So we've all been sort of anticipating that it's going to be more of a rotation this year, that it's going to be like 70% route share for 4 different receivers, for Jaden Reed, Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, and then Dontavian Wicks. Has been sort of at least the hope is that everybody gets at least 60% route participation. Maybe they get above 70, and I'm not sure that that's going to happen. So I guess I'll go down each of the receivers. So starting with, I think, in a vacuum, my favorite receiver to play would be Christian Watson. I think that he's still probably the best receiver on the team. He, I've seen it reported all over the place, hasn't missed a practice all summer. That's been the big deal with Christian Watson, has been his hamstrings have been fragile. He keeps getting hurt. Now he's been working on making his hamstrings the same strength, so maybe he's a little bit less likely to get hurt. He clearly still has that huge play upside. He's just 5,600, and he's projected for not a crazy amount of ownership, low 30s kind of ownership for Christian Watson at 5,600. that price tag, I think he probably operates as the wide receiver. I don't know that you can call anybody the wide receiver one on the Packers, but I think that he is as likely as Jaden Reed to be the leading receiver on the Packers. So I do like Christian Watson for that big play upside. Jaden Reed, I think, is pretty similar. Like I think both are going to just run most of the routes, be on the field majority of the time. And I think Romeo Dobbs as well. So I think those are the three Packers receivers that I am targeting the most. I don't think that I'm going out of my way to target Dontavian Wicks any more than the field today, which it hurts me to say, with Dontavian Wicks being somebody that I drafted quite a bit of in best ball. But for now, at least, I think Romeo Dobbs is, I mean, he said that, Jordan Love has said that Romeo Dobbs is his favorite target. We have no reason to believe that that is not true. So, and Romeo Dobbs projected for mid-20s ownership, so actually less ownership than both Jaden Reed and Christian Watson. I am pretty into Romeo Dobbs. He's more expensive than Reed or Watson, and I think the worst receiver of all of them. I think he's worse than both Watson and Reed, and I think he's worse than Wicks. But Jordan Love loves him, no pun intended. I think he's going to be out on the field as much as anybody. So I am willing to pay up a little bit for Romeo Dobbs. I'm willing to pay that $6,800 price tag because I think it drives down ownership a little bit. For large field GPPs, I think that is what we want to do. Now talking about Wicks. So that's the hard one for me. Like I said, I don't think I'm going to go out of my. I'll play some Wicks, but I think Wicks has been talked about all summer. Everybody wants to play Wicks. Everybody's wants to see how this rotation breaks down. People want to get ahead of it. They want to think, oh, Wicks is going to play a lot more than people anticipate. And what worries me about Wicks here, I'll pull it up here. So you look at Packers snap shares from last year. For the most part, he was only playing significant snap share when Christian Watson was out. So when Watson was out during this stretch, you see, still even then, he has one game, 78% snap share, 72% here with Christian Watson out. We had, even with this game, with Jaden Reed missing the game and Christian Watson missing the game, only played 39%. Played some slot there with Jaden Reed out. So that's part of the bull case for Dontavian Wicks is he has multiple outs to getting on the field if one of the starters goes down. And I think he could, because he's shown so much talent throughout the year. Last year he showed so much talent. I think that he could win one of those starter jobs. So I've liked him throughout the year as a best ball play because I think he could win more of a role on the team. And then he has multiple outs via injury to getting on the field. But I don't think he's going to be playing a ton tonight. And I could be wrong. I sort of hope I'm wrong, but 40% snap share in the NFC Championship game doesn't give me a lot of confidence. It doesn't make me think that these coaches are itching to play more Dontavian Wicks. With everybody healthy, he played the fewest snaps of that group of four receivers. So that I don't love that. And then, over the summer, we had Jordan Love talk about like, oh, Wicks is going to have a great year. There's a lot of buzz surrounding Wicks, but then the preseason usage didn't really show that, didn't really indicate that they're going to be playing him anymore. Maybe that's misdirection. Maybe they really want to play Dontavian Wicks. But I think the better bet is that they're not going to, especially if the field is going to play it as though Wicks is going to have a bigger role. And what have we seen? I mean, he's mid-teens ownership is what he's projected for. I think that's fine. I think it's a reasonable number. So I guess what I'm saying is I'm not going to be jamming him into lineups. I'm not going to be above weight to the field on Dontavian Wicks. I think the players that I'm more likely to play above weight to the field are Romeo Dobbs, projected for mid-20s ownership. Christian Watson, I do think he could be in for a breakout year. Jaden Reed, obviously, showed the talent last year. Good question from Dan. Here's the beer. Thank you for asking. All right. Yeah. So he is coming in. At least he's projected to have the lowest ownership of the bunch. That's probably correct. I think sometimes I overestimate how many of the people who play these showdown slates were reading the buzz all year. So I think last night I made the mistake of saying that I thought Justice Hill was going to come in higher owned than he was projected. He came in lower than he was projected. So I was totally wrong on that, just from the little bit of buzz. But that was more like, a few friends of mine were talking about him. Whereas I think Dontavian Wicks, the buzz has been more like overwhelming. It's been everywhere all summer. My fantasy football friend drafted him before I could in my fantasy football league. I was shocked. So I think that it's a little bit more real, a little bit more likely that he gets pushed up in ownership into like the low 20s. But generally, I think the projections on the sites are probably better than I am at predicting ownership, and those projections all have Wicks the lowest of the four Packers receivers, the four main Packers receivers, but like over 15%. No, this is actually once again a spotted cow from New Glarus in Wisconsin. I still have some of those, so gonna finish those before I go out and get more beer. All right, so did I finish up? Oh, let's so those are, so generally my preference. Romeo Doubs probably my favorite, and that's funny because he was the one that I drafted the least in best ball. I don't think he is the best, but I think Jordan Love really likes Romeo Doubs. I think he'll be out there quite a bit. Christian Watson I do think is in for a breakout year this season. I like Christian Watson a bit. Jaden Reed certainly playable. They're all pretty strong options. None of them as strong of bets as the Eagles receivers, but they're all cheaper, not going in with a ton of ownership. So I do like those Packers receivers. I also think Bo Melton is a little bit interesting as a low owned play. Not going to get a ton of ownership. Pull this back up. Yeah, you can see here does not project for much at all. When we look at the snap share for Bo Melton, like barely played until the end of the year, did play 25% of snaps in that championship game. So that's also what maybe cut into Dontavian Wicks a little bit. I think that he's playable. He's more likely to come in like if somebody gets hurt. I don't know that I'm expecting Bo Melton to play a ton. I think he's a relatively thin bet. He's not somebody that I would play in anything but the largest field GPPs. But I think at his price tag, and actually if you look at advanced receiving stats from last year, I thought this was interesting. So part of the reason we all love Dontavian Wicks is the elite yards per route run. He was just awesome last year. Now I had to, this is an extremely small sample size, but Bo Melton, I made it small enough so you can see Bo Melton 3.16 yards per route run, also an elite number. So it might be more of a Jordan Love number, but part of the reason we like Dontavian Wicks, he was better than all of Reed, Watson, Dobbs in yards per route run, first downs per route run. But Bo Melton, a much smaller sample, but even better than Dontavian Wicks. I think he's a fine play for large field GPP. It's not somebody that I'm jamming in, but he should be low owned. So I do have some interest in Bo Melton. All right, so moving on to, I think I covered, let me just double check that I covered every wide receiver that I'm interested in playing. Yep, okay. Tight ends, we do have, we thought Tucker Kraft might miss today. He was a little bit limited in practice throughout the week, but he is playing tonight. I guess I'll start with Dallas Goedert. Dallas Goedert, the only tight end I'm playing from the Eagles. Yeah, I think he is a very strong option. I do have interest in Dallas Goedert. Actually, let me pull up. Now this is from last year, so I'm a little bit hesitant to use defensive stats from last year because it's not particularly sticky year over year. But I do want to look at schedule adjusted. I should have looked at this before I started, but it's like I said, super tired. It's been a very, very busy day for me. I want to look at tight end specifically. In terms of, so this is schedule adjusted fantasy points allowed per game. So this should give you an indication of how good the defenses are against positions. Okay, so the Eagles gave up slightly more fantasy points per game than you would expect to tight ends. Doesn't really stand out. Nothing about that is all that interesting. Green Bay gave slightly less. I don't really care about those numbers. Neither of those is an outlier to the extent that I'm going to factor it in. But yeah, I like Dallas Goedert. I think he's just going to be out there, most of the game. Looking at snap shares from last year, Dallas Goedert. Look at this early in the year, nearly 100% snap share throughout the year. He was just, he's on the field most of the time. He'll be targeted some of the time. I think he is a strong bet. Probably needs a touchdown to pay off, but could potentially get there without a touchdown. Yeah, 76% route participation last year for Dallas Goedert, 82 targets, pretty strong numbers. He's one of the, he's not quite elite, I would say, but he's like the next tier. He's probably the best tight end in this game, in a vacuum. So yes, I am into Dallas Goedert. Let me double check ownership projections on him, make sure that it's not, I don't think he's going to be crazy high owned. He's 5,800. Yeah, projected for, I would say, reasonable ownership around the industry. Looks like, sub 30% ownership likely going to Dallas Goedert. He's somebody that I might be interested in playing in the captain spot. I think he has enough upside that he could be viable captain. So yeah, I like Dallas Goedert coming in sub 30% ownership. I don't think he's a huge stand for me. I'm probably going to be close to the field on Dallas Goedert. Not doing anything out of the ordinary there. I think the Packers is where I am going to be a little bit different from the field, going to differentiate with the tight ends on the Packers. And I talked about it a little bit already that I think Tucker Kraft, we're talking about like who could be the Isaiah Likely tonight. Now it's that he's somebody already brought up. He's the obvious one. He's the backup tight end who should have a role. We don't know how much that role is going to be. How much are they going to play together? Because both of these tight ends were hurt at some point last year, but I think there's some talent there. Tucker Kraft also going to be really low owned. So I think he's a talented tight end. It's kind of unclear what his role is going to be. I think most likely Luke Musgrave is still the starter, is going to get most of the run for the Packers. But I do think that it's worth noting that Tucker Kraft is, I don't think that there's a huge talent differential between Tucker Kraft and Luke Musgrave. And he's healthy. We thought he might miss time coming into the year. He's not missing time. He's playing tonight. As you can see here, projects, has half of the projection that Luke Musgrave does essentially, but he's only 2,800. I think he could have a role. Let's take a look at Packers snap counts. How often, they didn't play that much together. So yeah, in general, last year when both were healthy, early in the year, Luke Musgrave, actually throughout the year, early in the year, it's Luke Musgrave dominates snaps, and then later in the year, so Luke Musgrave misses a bunch of time. Tucker Kraft just absolutely dominates without Luke Musgrave. And then when Luke Musgrave came back in the playoffs, it was Tucker Kraft who was dominating the snap share for the Packers. So that's sort of interesting. Who knows to what extent Luke Musgrave was still limited by injury. But the fact that they played Tucker Kraft this much in the playoffs and they won a couple of those games is kind of promising to me. Like I said, I don't think there is a huge talent gap there. Musgrave, what's up, Rody? Everyone talking tight ends. Yeah, it's just because he's projected for such low ownership and he is cheap, and it is sort of an ambiguous situation. So those are the kinds of places that I want to attack. So yeah, it's likely that that Musgrave is still the starter for the Packers, gets most of the run, but it's at least interesting that it was Tucker Kraft getting a lot of run in the playoffs last year. He's a talented tight end. And even if he doesn't get a ton of run at 2,800, just score one touchdown, probably enough to pay it off. So I like that he doesn't need to have like over 50% rep participation to get there as a tight end. He's a little bit more likely to just be targeted in the end zone, but then he also has the potential to actually play a lot more than we expect. To kind of rotate in, maybe split time with Musgrave. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. Musgrave was still hurt in the playoffs. I think that's the likely reason that we still had Tucker Kraft playing more. But again, I believe in the talent for Tucker Kraft, and we also, early in the year when Musgrave was like the clear tight end one, I think Musgrave was, when Musgrave was the clear tight end, I think Kraft was a bit limited to start the year last year. So I don't know that we just don't have a huge sample of both tight ends being healthy. I think it's reasonable to assume that Musgrave starts the year as the lead tight end. But it wouldn't be that shocking to me if Kraft is, kind of rotating in, if it's close to an even split. So I like him for that reason at his price tag, at low ownership. I think that he's an interesting play, not like Likely, where it was, there were reports that they were going to be playing together, because it's a little bit different in that I think the Packers do have a lot of talented receivers. So I think it's pretty unlikely that they run a lot of two tight end sets like the Ravens did last night. So I don't think the upside is the same as Likely, but I think the upside is it could split. Like it could just be an even split between Kraft and Musgrave, and at low ownership at his price tag. Yeah, I think it's a solid play. It's not like a slam dunk play. There's definitely not the same situation as likely to be clear. Yeah, Ben Sims. That's Ben Sims could score a touchdown. I think with both the tight ends healthy, he's a little bit of a thin bet, but if you're doing 150 lineups, I think I would definitely have some Ben Sims. Probably not making my lineup pool tonight. I think I'm playing 25 lineups tonight. I don't think I'll be playing Ben Sims in those lineups. But yeah, he was still involved late in the year last year. I think he's a fine, low owned flyer, and he's only 200, which is kind of nice. Allows you to do more with your lineup than the other tight ends. So I do think I'd be more inclined to play Ben Sims than Grant Calcaterra, at least. There is that. Did I change the graphic? Let me double check. I never changed the graphic. Oh shoot. I've been talking about tight ends this whole time and I still had it on wide receiver, but you guys follow, right? You know what we're doing here. All right. So I think that covers tight ends pretty well. And now we get to everybody's favorite part of the show, where I talk about defenses and kickers. I say that jokingly, but it is actually the biggest stand that I'm taking tonight. Who is your Bateman? The biggest stand I'm taking tonight isn't really a player so much as it is taking a philosophy with my lineups. I'm playing this as though the Eagles defense is elite. So I thought the Eagles defense was going to be pretty good last year, and they were disappointing. They were not great last year. I still think they have a ton of talent. I think they've, the majority of the Eagles defense has played together for a long time now. So I think that the Eagles could be better than we're expecting this year. And I think that it's, I don't know how likely it is. I think it's more likely than the field is going to play it that way. I think everybody wants to play this game through the Packers receivers. Everybody's super excited to see how are the Packers going to look? What's the rotation going to look like? I want to get ahead of it. I think it's going to be Wicks. So I'm going to play Wicks in my lineup. I think he's going to get more run. Or no, I don't think it's going to be Wicks. I think Romeo Doubs is still the guy. So I'm going to play Romeo Doubs. He, make the case. He ran all the routes last year. He was on the field all the time last year. So I think everybody's playing this. Everybody's going to be playing this through narratives of, I want to play Packers receivers, make my bet on who's going to be the Packers receiver. I think that there is a real possibility that the Eagles defense is just really good this year. And I would rather play it. And we have, Jordan Love, again, I think he's good. Sadly, as a Vikings fan, I don't love that, but I do think Jordan Love is good. I don't know that he's elite though. So I think that there is the possibility that if the Eagles defense comes in ready to play, that they can shut down the Packers, really limit the amount that the Packers score in this game, maybe get a takeaway or two. They're also playing in Brazil. It's an interesting factor that they're playing abroad. Nobody's really fully comfortable. I mean, you're in the NFL, you're on NFL field. You're probably never totally comfortable, but maybe a little bit more uncomfortable than usual when you're in Brazil. So that's not really a huge factor for me. But the factor is, I think the Eagles defense might be elite this year, might be better than we're anticipating. And I think that there's a possibility that they shut the Packers down. They have a pick six. They have a couple takeaways, hopefully score one. So I think the biggest stand I'm taking isn't really a single player. It is playing through the philosophy of, what if the Eagles just shut the Packers down? Now I'll still have a Packer in my lineup, Packer too. But I think playing some lineups like maybe they just can't get it done through the air is an interesting way to play this slate that not many people are going to play. Okay, yeah, this is the thing I said at the beginning. I don't even know who is playing at home. I don't think it really matters though. Like it's not the same as playing in Lambeau, playing in Brazil. So the fact that they're technically the home team, I don't really think plays that big of an impact. So yeah, my biggest stand is going to be, I'm going to play a good amount of the Eagles defense. I think that they're going to go fairly low owned. Let me double check the ownership there. But I think that it's, and you could play it the other way too if you wanted to play the Packers defense. I'd rather play it through the Eagles defense, but they're just 4,000, only projected for 5 fantasy points here. Not going to get much ownership at all, and I think they might surprise some people this year. So I like the idea of playing it through the Eagles defense. Which Packers do you play if you stack Hurts and Eagles D? Let me think through that. Let's start making some lineups. But yeah, as usual. Okay, so now I'm getting mixed information. Technically, it's an Eagles home game. I don't know what to make of this. But yeah, I mean, I think kickers and defenses always pretty strong plays. I think, like I said, I think the biggest stand I'm taking of that group is I want to have more of the Eagles defense, but it's hard to go wrong. They usually go a little bit under owned across the board. And yeah, we're seeing that again. Looks like you're not going to have a ton of ownership going to the kickers and defenses, probably even lower ownership on the slate, just because there are so many players that people are excited about for their fantasy teams that they want to play, with the Packers rotation being, four receivers deep, with people being kind of excited for the tight ends in the game. I think that we probably see a little bit lower ownership than we should on kickers and defenses. So I think they're all pretty strong plays. Just my favorite bet is the Eagles defense in this one. And it's not like the likeliest bet. I just think it's going to be low owned for the large field GPP. So again, it's a play that I'm making for the largest field GPP. Not something that I'm like going out of my way to do in a cash game setting. All right, let's go and make some play around with the lineups a little bit on DraftKings. So let's start with Hurts captain, Eagles D. I think that's what we were talking about. So like I said, I think when I have Hurts at captain, I still generally want to have him paired up with a pass catching option. We have 75. So we played the cheap Eagles defense. We have 75-25 left per player. So we're in a good situation here. Now, I don't hate the idea of playing the Eagles defense with Packers players, including Jordan Love. So I'm not opposed to playing Jordan Love in an Eagles defense lineup. So maybe we're making the assumption that the Eagles defense largely shuts them down, but still Jordan Love he's not going to put up 0 fantasy points. He's still a good quarterback, probably throws for a touchdown. So let's go Love, Dobbs. Still got 67.50 left over per player. Now we'll stack up with Hurts, Goddard. And now we have 7,700 left. Oh, this is beautiful. So now we could play Reed, but we're kind of betting against Packers. Nah, I think that's a viable play for a large field GPP. Leaves 1,300 on the table. So this is a Hurts, does scores on the ground, throws a touchdown to Goddard. The Packers, Jordan Love throws an early pick six. The Eagles defense scores there, but then he throws, 100 yards to Jaden Reed without a score, throws to Romeo Dobbs, 40 yards and a touchdown. That's the way this lineup kind of works out. Or maybe throws one touchdown to each of Dobbs and Reed, but neither of them gets to like 100 yards. I don't know. Just trying to tell a story here. There are plenty of ways for it to get there with this type of lineup. Leave some salary on the table. It's going to project fairly well. It is easy to make lineups tonight. These Packers prices in particular are just way too cheap. So it should be a fun slate. What else should I try? Any other captains you want me to try? Anything like that? All right, let's play your highest owned players in best ball tonight. Love that. I think that a lot of people are going to do that. All right, let's see. Dotson captain. All right, I'll try a Dotson captain lineup. So Jahan Dotson, what's his price tag here? 4,800. Now I was asked earlier if you would play a wide receiver or a tight end in the captain spot without their quarterback. And I answered that I would, and that is true. I still think the cheaper wide receivers like Jahan Dotson, if he is the optimal captain, it's pretty unlikely that Hurts is not in the lineup. So I think that this is, in this case, if Dotson is the captain need here, I would be more inclined to play Hurts in the lineup. Now I don't think I would play. I think I would play a max if I have Dotson in the captain spot. Probably a max of one more pass catcher from the Eagles. It's just unlikely that he gets there to be the optimal captain with like a full onslaught. Could do it. I'm trying to think. Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think if Dotson does enough to be the optimal captain, it's pretty unlikely that both Brown and Devonta Smith get there. So I think I would be less inclined to do so. Throw in I'm not playing a ton of Josh Jacobs, but maybe it makes sense in this one. Play Josh Jacobs. Maybe throw in one other Eagles pass catcher. Let's see if I throw in Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. I was still, man, too much money left over. Actually, not. I could see now. I could play. Don't have any Packers pass catchers. All right, so let's go AJ Brown, and then, oh no. What if I throw Jordan Love in there? And now I go to Romeo Dobbs. That's probably too much money left over. So what would I upgrade here? Man, it's too easy to use all the salary. Or sorry, it's too easy to leave salary tonight. So this would need, I mean, all of these players outscoring Devontae Smith, because you could upgrade every single one of these. So the only way this lineup works is if every single one of these flex plays outscores Devontae Smith. It's plausible, honestly. That could certainly happen. Actually, they would all need to also outscore Saquon Barkley. Is plausible. But then they also need to. Would I have enough money to throw Jacobs into the captain spot? Yeah, I honestly, I think this is plausible. This is leaving 4,000 on the table. I'm having a hard time talking myself out of it by looking at and to be clear, this is not a lineup that is likely to win. I'm just thinking, is this one like impossible to win? I don't think it is, because I think the only players that it's like, man, there's no way that Dotson outscores them, or would be too expensive to play in the captain spot, like Hurts, and even that, like Dotson could outscore, like he could have a huge game. I'm not really expecting it. So I think this is a like viable for the largest field tournament. And again, I'm probably not playing this lineup, leaving a little bit too much on the table. Not the highest probability, but I can't say anything that I'm like, this is impossible for this to win. Let's try something a little bit different. Let's try starting with AJ Brown at captain, because I think he's going to be low owned. Now this is where it's more likely to work out without Hurts in the lineup, just because now you don't have that much salary left over. So let's try here. Now Love he's only $800 less than Hurts, so it's a little bit of a tougher bet, but let's try it. Jordan Love with Dobbs. Maybe now this would be a good one, since we have we have Brown in there without Hurts. Maybe Barkley scores at the end zone. So Brown has 100 yards and a touchdown. Barkley scores a touchdown. Hurts does not score another touchdown besides the one he throws to Brown. Got Love with Dobbs in there. Now we go down to some of those cheaper options that we like. I talked about liking Tucker Kraft as a contrarian play. Throw Tucker Kraft in there, and now we have 4,700 left over. Let's go to Eagles defense. 700 left over. Perfectly good lineup here. You actually could not play. I like that this one has $700 remaining. So like if you could not play Hurts instead of Love here, you don't have enough salary to upgrade to Hurts. You're $100 short. So I like that. That makes this one a little bit more likely to work out. You got the double stack with Love, with Dobbs and Kraft. AJ Brown goes off. Barkley scores a touchdown. Eagles defense, has a pick six. That looks like a pretty strong large field GPP lineup. All right, I'll go back to chat a little bit. Yeah, never too much money left over. I mean, I think you can reach a point sometimes on some slates where you can leave too much money left over, or it's just totally implausible that the captain that you chose is going to outscore all of the players that you could have upgraded to. But yeah, I think that one seemed like I couldn't talk myself out of it as this is impossible. Did you do a Wicks captain? I don't think I'm playing Wicks in the captain tonight. It's viable. Like if you do think Wicks is going to play over 50% of snaps, I think he's a viable captain. I don't really think he's going to. Let's try this. Play your highest owned players in best ball tonight. All right. Let me see if I can. Because I think I do have. I know that I have Wicks in best ball. So I guess I'll make a Wicks lineup here. By the way, RIP to my best ball lineups, because I only have 4% Isaiah Likely in best ball. So that is quite sad for me. So definitely it's going to be Wicks. All right, let's see. Packers, I have. Oh, and Marshawn Lloyd. Wicks, Watson, Love. I have a ton of those three. And then Eagles, Devonta Smith, Hurts, Goddard. Could I play that? Wicks, Watson, Love, Smith, Hurts, Goddard. Maybe if I play Wicks in the captain. Let's see. Wicks, Watson, Love, Hurts, Smith. Oh, thank you. Just made this lineup for me. There you go. All my highest exposed players from this game all fit into this lineup perfectly. Now, I wonder if I could play Watson instead of Wicks in the captain spot. I could. Still leave $1,000 left over. Look at that lineup. That's just beautiful. Crushed it. Just have to play all your best players from best ball, your highest exposed player. Devonta Smith captain. All right, let's do a Devonta Smith captain lineup. Again, if I play Devonta Smith at captain, I'm more inclined to play Hurts, because if he's going completely off, probably Hurts is coming along for the ride. Now let's go throw Watson there. I like Watson. Let's see. I kind of want to play some Gainwell. Maybe I don't need him in this lineup. Let's do a Musgrave lineup. I do think Musgrave is still probably the tight end one for the Packers. Then we can go Jordan Love, 5,800. Goddard. I probably wouldn't pay all the way up for Goddard, because I think that would probably be a lineup that is going to be used by the field a little bit. Maybe this is where Jake Elliott, talk about how much I think the kickers and defenses are going under-owned. I think Jake Elliott makes sense in this lineup. And there you have it. We got Jordan Love stacked up with Musgrave and Watson. You've got Smith going off, Hurts mostly throwing to Smith, and then a couple field goals, 3 field goals for Jake Elliott. Bam. Look at that lineup. Strong. I did talk about how much I want to play Eagles defense lineups, and I'm not building for it. So let's think about a scenario where the Eagles defense is awesome. So maybe that's where, and this might be where everybody wants to, running back with defense. Maybe I don't want to do that because it's going to be super over-owned. I do like the idea of playing the defense against the opposing offense in some scenarios. But let's build for specifically Eagles defense crushes the Packers. So let's see if we can build out that way. I still think let's, in that case, start. So we're not using the Packers values. Could we play Eagles defense at captain? I'm not super inclined to, but let's try it. Eagles defense at captain. Now I'm playing for the Packers offense doesn't do a ton. So maybe in that case, still playing Hurts just for get that projection up there. Playing Devonta Smith, Dallas Goedert. Now we have 9,300 left per player. So it's still pretty likely that Love gets there. Let's go running backs. So then we can play Josh Jacobs and then Saquon Barkley. Leaves 1,000 on the table. I'm not expecting the Packers to do much. Josh Jacobs is just the one Packer player who does enough to make it into lineup. You got to have at least one Packer in every lineup. So Josh Jacobs, maybe scores 1 touchdown, ends up with 11 fantasy points, and that's the most you get out of the Packers. So this would be a Eagles dominate scenario. Mostly I'm going to be playing the Eagles in the flex. So then maybe you go, we could still do, Devonta Smith, Eagles defense. One Packers player, has 80 yards, 8 catches. That player is Romeo Doubs in this scenario. So you can see how I'm landing on Hurts in every lineup. Just makes a little bit too much sense. Saquon Barkley makes into that lineup, and then Jake Elliott ices the clock. There you go. There's a solid, I think, Eagles dominate lineup. We've got the one Packer in Romeo Doubs. Gets there through PPR, but the Packers don't actually do much. All right, let me answer some questions. Yeah, I'm fine playing Hurts captain with Barkley. It's not, it's a little bit slight negative correlation, but I think the field is going to probably not do a ton of that. So I think it's viable. What would a lineup look like if Hertz gets like 11? It would not include Hertz. So I guess I can try a non-Hertz lineup. Let's see. I hope so, Danny. I hope you win a milli on my advice. That would be awesome. Then I'll have to give out the Flannelverse logo. Oh shoot, I didn't switch my thing here to questions section. I do have the Flannelverse logo. If anybody wants to use it, it is in my Discord. I'm not really doing anything with it. I'm not like giving away money if you use it or anything like that, but it is in there if you wanted to use it. If I do win you a milli. But then you should probably just use like Saber Sim, somebody who gives you something awesome, like a cool watch. Probably makes more sense anyway. All right. How much receiving do you think Jacobs gets? Probably more than Barkley would be my guess. I think Jacobs, he's a reasonable pass catcher. I think he'll be targeted a handful of times, maybe 5 times. Large field, who is the best captain? And we're not including Wicks. I like AJ Brown. I like Romeo Dobbs, Devonta Smith. I think both Brown and Smith probably go a little bit under-owned because people just want to play through Jalen Hurts, Jordan Love. FanDuel, that's a good question. Who do you like on FanDuel for MVP, and what do you have Watson ownership in the captain? All right, let me take a look at that. So FanDuel. First of all, Watson captain should be like sub 5%, I think. So I think Watson is a very good captain. I think most of the outside of I think the running backs and the quarterbacks probably get the most captain ownership. Maybe AJ Brown, but he's so expensive. I don't think anybody else is going to be super highly owned. So you can pretty much go to any of those Packers receivers if you wanted to. And then at captain, I mean, on FanDuel, it'll be just the highest scoring player in the lineup is the optimal captain because there's no difference in price for playing them there. So Jalen Hurts is probably going to be super highly owned. So the players who are most likely to outscore if you have like Hurts in the lineup are the pass catchers because again they do score more points than the quarterback on every passing play. So generally, I like receivers at captain or at MVP on FanDuel in general. I think Devonta Smith going to have very low ownership. Clearly has that big play upside that could lead to him being the optimal captain. They do have bonuses now on. I haven't looked if that. I think that applies to FanDuel where they have the 100-yard bonuses and stuff, which I sort of hate that they did that. I liked that there were some differences there, but yeah, I think Devonta Smith is a very good captain on FanDuel. Looks like all of the Packers receivers are going to be super low owned. So I think if you just avoid the quarterbacks on FanDuel at MVP and the running backs, you're going to avoid most of the ownership. So I do think that makes some sense to just throw in, the random receivers in the MVP spot. It's just an easy way to get different there. Yeah, I think Jacobs and Barkley is viable together. I don't love playing running backs from the same game in general. Like there's some on a main slate, there's a little bit of negative correlation because it means like they're kind of slowing the game down if they're both going off. But on a showdown slate, I think it's totally fine because you don't really care that much if the game is fast or slow. You just want it's the only game you get to choose from. So I think it's totally fine to play both. What's up, Best Ball on call? If you did a Packers 5-1, what Eagle makes the most sense? Packers 5-1, what Eagle makes the most sense? Depends how much money you have left over. Dallas Goedert maybe could be a PPR scam. You could play Hurts in a 5-1. Like it could be just Hurts does enough on the ground. Maybe throws a touchdown to AJ Brown, spreads the ball around, rushes in a touchdown. So I think you could play Hurts in a Packers 5-1. Really depends how much money you have left over. I think I would be not inclined to play the kicker for the Eagles in that case because it's pretty unlikely that the kicker scores like 5 field goals while the Packers are going off, just because at some point they wouldn't kick the ball anymore if they're down by too much, if the Packers are getting ahead a ton. So probably wouldn't play uh, Eagles kick Jake Elliott in a Packers 5-1. You could even play the defense. Like if you just want to play for a Packers onslaught, the Packers crush, you could play the Eagles defense there. Just from a like the Eagles don't do anything, but maybe the defense has a pick six if the offense really sputters. So that's the way you could play it. But yeah, really depends how much money you have left over. All right. I think that's going to do it. I need to go make some lineups. Game starts in about 20 minutes. I do want to say I really appreciate all of you again hanging out with me. It's been so much fun talking DFS again after really long break from talking DFS, talking best ball for forever. Awesome to get back into DFS. Appreciate you hanging with me. I am super tired today, so apologies if I didn't bring my usual energy. I'm trying. I will be back for Sunday Night Football. I'll be doing a write up for fantasy points again. Flannelman 25 gets you 25% off any product at Fantasy Points, so go check that out if you haven't already done so. I will be on Roto Grinders live show on Sunday morning. Of course, tomorrow, myself and Scott Barrett, we are back with Outside the Box, the show that I do that gets the best buzz. Last year just got an insane amount of buzz. Nothing I've ever seen before in my content. So that was really fun. We'll be doing a main slate breakdown tomorrow on the Fantasy Points YouTube channel tomorrow afternoon. So check that out if you haven't already. But again, I'll be back on this channel on Sunday doing Sunday Night Football. Thank you guys very much, and I will catch you later.